If I remember correctly, Switzerland actually has a really long history within the church. In fact, that's part of the reason why the first temple built in Europe was in Switzerland, in Bern. I believe it was one of the first places after England where missionaries were sent to help bring people to the church. I can't remember the backstory exactly, but I think the first member of Switzerland, if I remember, was a shoemaker. And the elders in the field in Switzerland had shoes that were totally destroyed, and they went to a shoemaker, and while they were waiting for their shoes to be repaired, they started talking to this guy about the gospel. And from there, he learned about the Book of Mormon, read it, and yeah, you got your first member in Switzerland. And I mean, the members in Switzerland today, even people from Germany or Austria will tell you the members in Switzerland are the strongest. It's one of those things, it's very family oriented. I think that the members in Switzerland, once they're members, they'll be members for generations. So that's what's really cool too about bringing a family into the church in Switzerland, is that there's a higher probability that not only them, but their children and their children's children will stay strong in the church. It's very, very family oriented there. The situation there in the mission, the Alpine German-speaking mission, it's a little strange. 2 years ago, any American could serve in Switzerland, and you would just have to apply for a visa, and just like if you were to go anywhere else, you'd get it in a couple months. But now, strangely enough, they're not allowing any Americans into Switzerland. They are allowing still Europeans to serve in Switzerland, and they might change that in the future, I'm not sure. But yeah, for about half of my mission, there were only 6 to 10 American missionaries, and pretty much what it was, she had these American missionaries who had gotten their visa before the cutoff, and we just kept updating our visas, and so we just stayed there until we went home. But yeah, today, I don't think there's a single American American missionary in Switzerland unless they have some ties to Switzerland family-wise. So they have to be kind of a dual citizen or something like that. But that doesn't go to say that you can't have American missionaries in Austria or Germany. That's still totally allowed. But that's why you kind of had a segregation within the mission itself, is because of these visa problems that we were having. And I think that they originally decided to do that because, I want to say because there were huge immigration problems in Switzerland. I think France is working to do the same thing. And so to cut down on people immigrating into the country with visas, via visas, they made it so that not only Americans, but anyone who's not European couldn't get a visa there, a work visa. So yeah, that was kind of a strange, that was like, I think every mission has one of those ongoing problems that they're trying to deal with. And for our mission, it was visas. It was very, very difficult for missionaries to move around as much because of the visa problems. Another thing that you have in Switzerland is regarding the languages, is every different, we call them cantons, it's kind of like a state in America. So they have 26 cantons, and every canton has a different dialect. So that's why they encourage you not to learn a specific Swiss German, because you might speak a Swiss German in Bern, and you won't understand the Swiss German in Zurich. So for the most part, the missionaries will continue to speak High German, because everyone understands High German. But you just will never really come off as a Berner or a person from Zurich. You'll be just the High German person. But some missionaries try to learn Swiss German, especially if they're in an area for a long time. I was in Bern actually for 7 months, and by the end I picked up a little bit of Bern Swiss German, which we call Berndeutsch. But yeah, that's something that some missionaries tinker with. It's kind of fun. So High German, there's a reason why we call it high. It's kind of like the elite German. It's the clean cut German. It's, if you dare say, it's the Berliner, just the fiery, sophisticated German, I want to say. An example of high German would be, Ich komme von der Stadt und ich will etwas tun. It's more, I want to say, just clean cut. Whereas Swiss German is more, I want to say hunky-bunky, if that's a word. It's more countryish. It's more rhythmic. It's more of like a country accent. But surprisingly, I would say that Swiss people come off as more sophisticated than a lot of Germans do. So it's kind of this strange, almost paradox. So Swiss German, as opposed to High German, sounds more like, Wir haben heute etwas zu tun. Or I think a huge part of the Swiss German language is that they say "xi" as opposed to gewesen, which is been. So they don't have really a word for was in Swiss German. So instead they just say to become. So they pretty much everything that you say in Swiss German, if you're saying past tense, it says "xi," which isn't even a word in High German. You would never say "xi." But that's something you'll pick up. I mean, I can talk about it, but once they're there, they'll realize it and they'll see it and they'll be like, "Oh, that's what in the world that is." And I mean, that comes with time. There's nothing really you can explain or say to help someone understand that concept. So, I mean, a lot of it's just you gotta experience it. And you have to respect other people and their cultures. I remember one time I was in East Switzerland. And I was on a bus, and as missionaries, we just, the ideal is that you just talk with everyone. You don't even really think about who it is. You just talk with everyone because you like to think that you don't need to judge someone by their cover, ever. And I was talking to this woman on a bus, and she was, she was Muslim. She had the shawl. And we had a great conversation, but when I got off the bus, the first thing that happened is that this Turkish guy grabbed me right by the lapels, slammed me against the side of the bus. He was like, "Who are you talking to? Why are you doing this?" And I learned real quick that, you have to respect that, you don't just casually talk to everyone. You have to respect people's ideals. And in their culture, it was not ideal for me to be just talking happily with this Muslim woman. It was disrespectful. And although I didn't realize that it was, even at the time I didn't realize it. I thought he was being just rude and obnoxious. But now that I think back about it, I was like, wow, I really must have offended that man. Perhaps it was his wife and I didn't even know, So you just have to be cautious. You need to be aware of your surroundings, be aware of the people around you, and the cultures that you may or may not be offending. So you do your best every day. I like to think that if you're called to Switzerland or a European mission, they expect you to be smart. All missionaries need to be smart in one sense or another, but European missionaries definitely need to be street savvy. They need to know who to talk to and to make sure that they don't offend anyone. Obviously not all missionaries are from America, but just like you'll read in Preach My Gospel, the church has kind of a stereotype of being American associated, so it's important that we don't make that worse. But yeah, just don't offend people. That's key. In Switzerland, there are a lot of refugees. A lot of them are from Nigeria, which, I don't think I ever knew that before I went to Switzerland. I don't think most people do. But a lot of these refugees, they can manipulate. They can look for ways into a church organization so that they can receive money, or sometimes they look for a way in so that they can stay within the country. And so it's always important to be cautious, to know that that's a real factor for a lot of the people who investigate the church. Not to say we should avoid such people, because honestly, I mean, I had two baptisms from Nigeria, and they were both great guys, and I even got to see one go through the temple. So I mean, it's not to say that they're all like that, but it's definitely something you want to be cautious of. And yeah, that just goes along with being street savvy. So your typical Swiss is very timely, crazy timely. And you see it everywhere you go. Everywhere you go, there's a clock somewhere, a clock tower, a digital clock. And even by the second, they're very timely in everything that they do. The trains and buses almost always arrive perfectly on time. And it's just a different atmosphere, because Americans, some of us are like that, but not like that. So they're very timely. Most of them, obviously there's the stereotype that Swiss are involved in banking, and that's not far off. A lot of them are involved in banking or business to some extent. A lot of them have daytime jobs from 8 to 5. And so sometimes when they tell you I don't have time, it's really because they don't have time. They may be trying to catch a bus that comes in 30 seconds, but you wouldn't know that because you're just catching them out of context. And you have to respect that a lot of Swiss people are timely, and they will just walk away if they have to. I mean, a huge phrase that you hear too, you hear, "Ich muss go arbeiten," which is like, I gotta go to work, you know. They're very aware that work comes first in their day-to-day lives. And if they're not like that, that's probably because either they're not Swiss or something's happened that's not normal. So yeah, just be aware that if a Swiss is in their normal routine, they'll be very timely, and they'll usually be going to or from work. And so that's the trick, is to find them when they're not going to and from work. So I mean, as missionaries, we really have to take advantage of holidays, take a lot of advantage of meeting members with members and communicating with the members who's ready for the gospel. Because if you, like I said before about how Swiss really, their reputation and relationships are very important. In the same sense, if you can get a Swiss member to work with you and to meet with someone, that person that you meet with is going to be very respectful, because they recognize that this member is their friend and they want to respect their friend, and so they'll meet with you and give you the utmost respect. I mean, the meetings that you have with the appointments that you have that were set with members are at least 10 times more effective than the ones that you just have casually on the street or that you kind of find yourself. Not to say that those can't be good. Sometimes great members come from that too, but definitely member work is very important. Like I said before, they're very family oriented, so the average Swiss person wants to be with their family. They want to be at home, they want to be comfortable, they want to be drinking hot tea, and they like their time alone. You know, they like their family time. So sometimes if you interrupt that, even if it's for a good cause, say to teach their family about Jesus Christ, they may not want it, and they may be like, this is family time, you need to go. And you respect that, and you go and talk to someone else. Swiss people are very nice. They love to please. They love to be on your good side. They're very, very friendly. Oh my goodness, they're so friendly. The problem that you have, though, and I think every mission can relate to some sort of almost, I want to say, social withdrawal that you're having, a barrier, so to say, is that they can be so nice that you mistake them for having interest in the gospel, when really they're just trying to be nice to you. Whereas the Germans, they'll just tell you if they don't want to talk to you, they'll just be like, hey, pass over, like, get out of here. But the Germans, they'll continue to talk to you, or they'll have an excuse like, oh, ich habe keine Zeit, which you'll probably hear that more than anything in your mission. Ich habe keine Zeit, which means I don't have any time. But you know, that's okay. It's a very passive way of saying I don't have interest. But you know, you're gonna have people that don't have interest wherever you go, so it's totally fine. The Swiss people are very family oriented. They care about their reputation. Almost like the Chinese do, they're very, very loyal to their ideals. I remember talking to this one woman. She'd been living, I served next to the burned temple for about, I want to say 4 months. And there was this woman that we knew very, very well. And she wasn't a member, but she lived next to that temple pretty much since the time it was built in the 50s. So we're talking about a 60-year time span of, you know, meeting missionaries and rejecting missionaries and meeting missionaries and saying, you know what, I respect what you guys are doing, but it's not for me. And one time, I felt like when I was there, I got really close to this woman, because I would see her almost irregularly a lot. And one time, I was talking to her about truth, and I just asked her, you know, in German, of course, if you found out that this was true, would you do something about it? And she said, ehrlich nein, which means honestly no, I wouldn't. And that shows you how devout they are. They will live and die a lot of the times for what they are. And that's something that's very, very difficult, especially as Americans, for us to understand, that people in other countries will live and die for something even if they know it's not true. That's why it's super, super hard to talk to a devout Catholic. We used to work with a Catholic priest on our mission who knew the church was true. And for the life of him, he couldn't get himself to get baptized because he was too afraid of his reputation, of what his family would think, and ultimately what would happen to him. He was worried about himself, which, you know, is a hard thing. It's a hard thing for you to see someone who knows something's true and for them to reject it. And it happens a lot. It happens a lot. But that's something as a missionary in a European country, especially, I would say, southern Germany, Switzerland, and even Italy, that's one of the hugest barriers you have to overcome, is to realize even if they know it's true and don't accept it, I'm okay with it because it's their decision. Agency has always been the most important thing that we as missionaries have to respect. And it's hard. I mean, you devout to a person for 2-3 months, and you care about them and you love them, and sometimes they just don't want to change themselves. Yeah. However, it's better to know that someone believes in the church for personal reasons, even if they don't join the church, because then you know why it's so hard for the church to grow. It's not because it isn't truth. It's because people are very fixed in their ways and they don't change overnight. But it's reassuring, it really is. Because I think a lot of skeptics think that we just go there and we just don't help anyone, or because it's not true that no one wants to believe, or they just can't believe. But that's not how it is. Most of the people that you meet with and that you talk with on a regular basis, they will grow to appreciate the church. I met with one family where the wife was kind of the head hold. It was a strange situation, but we pretty much asked this woman, do you believe that Joseph Smith was a prophet of God? And she would say yes. Do you believe that the church was restored in modern day through the prophet Joseph Smith, and that the Book of Mormon is the Word of God? She would say yes. Then we'd ask, will you abide by this truth and be baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? She would say no. And mentally, it just doesn't make sense at all. It really is hard. Even today, it's difficult for me to understand this concept, but I really think it comes down to fear. Fear of abiding by something that you know is hard, which ironically is something that we all struggle with in one way or another. You might know that the church is true, but you can still struggle with a simple problem, and you just refuse to give it up. So, it just teaches me that humanity is all facing similar problems wherever you go. So, but just like any missionary, I have a deep love for the Swiss people. So, because I understand them now, You don't need to be afraid to ask someone for directions, even if you have to do it in English. I think a lot of missionaries, they kind of get in the pride of their hearts, like they have to speak their mission language, when the truth is probably 75% of Swiss people speak English, so they will speak with you in English if you really, really need it. So it's not worth getting lost over, It wasn't language related, but I remember one time I had a train connection that, the first train was late, and so I missed my connection, and I ended up taking the wrong train in the wrong direction. And so instead of ending up in Zurich, I ended up in Stuttgart, which is, I think it's pretty much the distance between Las Vegas and Salt Lake. It's a good ways. And I had to find my whole way back by myself because I was on the wrong train. But that stuff happens. I think it was in 2011, we had a couple missionaries who accidentally ended up in Hungary. And if usually your mission president's very understanding, and as long as it wasn't on purpose, you should be okay if that kind of stuff happens. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, but beware, it does happen. Missionaries, like anyone else, they're not perfect, and they'll do stupid stuff that gets them at the wrong side of a country or even a continent. So be aware that that does exist. So if it happens to you, you're not alone. I know as a missionary, the power of prayer really works. As a missionary, most missionaries will pray before they go out every day. I know we did. Right before we left our apartment every day, we'd say a prayer that we'd be able to find people that were ready for the gospel, that we'd be able to help someone in need. And you just kind of let the Spirit guide when it comes to those things. But I remember on one occasion, it was actually with one of our new converts from Nigeria, and he was being exported, but he didn't know when. And the worry was that he was going to be exported before he was allowed to go through the temple. And I remember there was this one critical time when he could have been exported any day. The police could have come to his door and just taken him, and we would have never seen him again. And we were so anxious that he was going to be taken before he was able to go to the temple. And I remember one time he called us from his refugee home, freaking out. He was saying, the police are here, they're going to take me away. I don't know what's going to happen. His name was Akene. And just right there and then, we asked him, we're like, Kenny, have they come to find you yet? Are they going to take you? He's like, no, they haven't taken me yet. They haven't taken me yet. And so me and my companion, we were doing our weekly inventory, and we just got down on our knees right there, and we prayed that the cops would not find him. I know it sounds ridiculous, but that's what we felt impressed to pray about. We just felt, what, God, I know that the laws of the land are most important, but if you can just give Akene another week so he can go through the temple, that would be great. And so that's what we prayed for. We prayed that the cops would not find Akene. and prayed for a good 10 minutes straight. I think I was crying. I was so sad that he was by chance going to be exported. Because, it's like with any people that you work with, you get so close to them and you just want to help them achieve everything that they can. And about 10 minutes later, Kenny called us back and he told us that the cops didn't collect him. They didn't run into him. For some reason or another, they just didn't ask him about his papers. And so, about a week after that, he was able to go through the temple. And that was, I think all missionaries are experienced like that. It's kind of like the movie The Best 2 Years. Sometimes the weirdest stuff feels like the greatest miracle. And that's something that only a missionary can relate to. You have to experience it to understand it. But it's true that God works in wonders and mysterious ways. You can take that to the bank. Because it's true. He helps you. He always helps you. One time with one of my best companions, we were in the middle of this Dorf. Well, yeah, Dorf is a German word for a village. We're in the middle of this village and it was just pouring snow. Switzerland, it does snow quite a bit. And it's very typical for 2 more missionaries to be the only people walking out in the street in the middle of winter in a snowstorm. And that was us, man. We were out there tracting and it was pouring snow like nobody's business. And we just felt completely helpless, We just felt like this is ridiculous. And at that moment we just kind of smiled and we went together and we just said a quick prayer right there in the middle of the street. And we said a prayer that we'd be able to find someone to talk to about the gospel on this cold winter day in the middle of East Switzerland. And right there and then comes this Turkish guy, He just comes up to us and he's like, "Hey, you guys are missionaries, right?" I said, "Yeah, we're missionaries." Like, "Do you want to come with me? I'll make you dinner and you can teach my family." We're just like, what? How does that happen? It doesn't happen. And it's stuff like that, It's the miracle of God that you see when you just have a humble prayer in your heart. And it just happens, And I remember with that guy, we did meet with him for, I think, like 7 or 8 times. I thought that he was the most miraculous person that could ever enter into my life. He didn't get baptized. The problem was that he was from Turkey and had a lot of ties to the Muslim culture. And like I said before, a lot of people that know the church is true sometimes don't have the strength or the bravery to take that step. And you need to respect that, but because you never know if they're going to take that step later. But I remember one lesson that we had with him where he was trembling. And it was really hard for us to focus and talk to him because he was trembling. And he went outside and was just trying to get some fresh air. And when he came back to us, he had a straight face and he just told us, "Elders, you know what? To be honest, I can't do this. But I know what you're saying is true. Because last night, I was sitting at the couch, and my 2-year-old daughter brought the copy of the Book of Mormon that you'd given to me, and brought it to me and said, 'Read this.' And we were dumbstricken because that was such a cool experience for someone to have. And it's miracles like that, there's some things in the mission field that are just too sacred to even want to try to understand completely. But you just let them nourish the rest of your life, And every mission will have that. Everyone will have that experience that you can't explain why it happened, but you just allow that to build your testimony and to nourish you for the rest of your life, And so that's what we as missionaries get out of it, you get that subtle building of a testimony that nobody else can take from you. So it's cool. It's so cool, man. I do know what it feels like to be a missionary, or to be someone going on a mission that is having doubts, that is struggling with the assurity that this is the right decision to make. And, you know, I can really say, as someone who's already done this, that it's more and better than anything you can ever expect. It'll teach you things about yourself that you didn't even know existed. It'll teach you character traits that you didn't know were possible to learn. It'll teach you how to be more patient. It'll teach you better study skills. It'll give you a testimony of this gospel like none other. That'll help you go through your life and help you see the big picture. You know, my brother is actually on his mission right now too. He's in Wisconsin, and it's been interesting to see how he's changed, coming from the other perspective, to see how he's changed as an individual, as opposed to who he was before the mission, just as how I was before the mission. And you know, I can say with full heart that the changes that he's made is that he is more grateful, he is more loving, he's a better writer, strangely enough, and he's just a better individual. He really is. A mission makes you a better individual. And you know, if you're struggling with your testimony, I want to say that's fine. Because all you really need to be a missionary is you need to have a love for the gospel. You need to have read the Book of Mormon. And I guarantee the rest you'll figure out. You'll have, I mean, that's what a mission does to you. It turns you, it makes you turn to the Lord, which as a result makes you a better person. So I guarantee if you go on a mission, you'll figure it out. You will. And just let the Lord change you. It'll work out. I know personally that this gospel is true. I've read the Book of Mormon, and I've prayed about it, and I know it's true. I know it's true. And no matter if people telling me that I've come from hell, no matter if people that persecute me, or belittle me, or belittle what I believe in, can change that. Because I figured it out for myself. And that's, I think, what's important. I guess in close, I guarantee you if you go on a mission, you'll become a better individual. I know that. And I love the Lord. I know that Jesus Christ will help every individual that comes unto Him. I know that the atonement is very real. And it won't just touch you, it'll touch everyone that takes you into their home. And whether or not they join the church, like I've said before, you'll help them understand truth. And you'll enlighten them. And you'll give them a perspective that they didn't have. And it's the Lord's work. That's why it's so great. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
So our mission actually covers 5 countries. So it's southern Germany from Munich down. It's all of Austria, the German-speaking part of Switzerland, the northern part of Italy, and Liechtenstein is actually in there as well. But we're not allowed to proselyte there, so it just kind of is thrown in there. Everywhere that we serve speaks German. But each country has a bit of a different German. Austrians are very sing-songy. Germans are just like the normal German that you hear, but it's Southern German, so it's a bit different than in the north. And Swiss people don't even speak German. I don't even know what it is. They speak Swiss German. It's totally different. It's totally weird, but it's beautiful. And Italy, the part that we serve in, they speak German as well. Something interesting about Switzerland is they have 4 mother tongues. So there's French, Italian, German, and Romanian. So there's an influence of all those languages, even in just the German. Even the High German that we speak as missionaries, like my German's very French because it's just so highly influenced from the other languages. I can speak more about Switzerland just because I spent more time there and I understood more at that time. I mean, German attendance, my first ward in Germany, we had like at least 200 people. It was a huge ward. I always served in really big wards. Great attendance, lots of less actives, but that's just how it is in every ward. Lots of work to do. It was a huge city. We always had visitors, whether the sisters or the elders, there was always someone there. And then in Switzerland, they have 3 German stakes, and also they have a lot of branches and a lot of districts and also wards. So I served in only wards. I had the fortunate opportunity to only serve with wards. But my ward in Zurich was about 220. It was huge. It was right next to the temple. So we had French and Italians always there because they lived at the temple, and that's the temple district for all those countries. And then same in Zurich. Zurich was awesome because it's an international, well, now it's actually an international ward. They just changed that. But it was nice because we always had so many visitors, so a lot of Americans. So I think if you looked at the actual ward and the amount of people that actually attended each week, it was probably about 180, which is still pretty big. But once you add in all the visitors, it was probably about 230 or so. I mean, obviously there were branches that were like 20 people or somewhere like 80, just depending on where you were. Their main religion is Christianity. There's their church, it's just like in Utah, but with Protestant and Catholic churches. They're everywhere. So they are a very religious people. And they say that they believe in God, but they don't attend church. They'll go for Christmas and for Easter, but beside that, they just stay at home and believe in God in whichever way. They often say that they believe in nature. And that's the way that they worship is spending time in nature, which you can see with the people. That's just their culture. They're always outside. Something cool about the Bern Switzerland temple, actually some history about that, is Karl G. Maser. He actually was a convert in Germany, and he was such a missionary that they actually kicked him out. So he crossed over the Alps and came into Switzerland and started to like build up the church there. But it was actually because of Karl G. Maser that the church was built in Switzerland, and there was actually quite a few saints there. I don't remember the numbers exactly, but by the time the Second World War came around, they had to close everything down. They had like an emergency overnight evacuation of missionaries. They had to take all the missionaries out and send them back home to America. And the Europeans actually said that they felt quite isolated, like the church had forgotten them because they just took everyone out. It was just not safe for us to be there. It was just cool how that all worked out, how the temple was to come about, and that it was chosen specifically in Bern. And that the people were ready. I mean, the Swiss saints are so strong. A lot of them migrated to America, which is why we have a lot of Swiss people here. I think that says a lot about, especially the Swiss. They're very proud people. They're very proud of who they are. They're very proud of their nationality. And I think that it's perfect that there's a temple there. With the fall of the Berlin Wall, you can tell that everything was broken. The people were lost. They didn't know quite what to do, but actually, it's really interesting. It's really interesting. My trainer actually told me, we were having a discussion about the people when I was still in Germany, and she said, you know, you can really feel that the people still have something that they're holding on to. Because the German history is just so rich. There's so many experiences and so many tragedies that those people have had to go through. And you can still feel that pressure on them. Especially when you talk to the older generations. They really still carry that with them. And a lot of them are scared to hope. They're really scared to believe in God because they've seen so much throughout their lives that they've just lost hope. And so to have a little 20-year-old girl come and tell them that there's Jesus Christ and they can hope in a life after death and that you can be saved and all these things, they kind of just shut you down because they're like, I've seen so much bad in the world. Like, who do you think you are? Being 20 years old can come tell me, who's had all this life experience. And that was really interesting to see them, like that such things that happened so many years ago can still play such a part on these people's lives. It was really incredible. So there's a lot of history there. That was like a ramble, but there is a lot of things about those people, a lot of historical events that shape who they are still. As missionaries, we learn High German, and in Switzerland they speak Swiss German, which is a dialect of German. And if you study the German culture, you can see actually that what the Swiss speak is just a really old version of German. before the language change in like the culture. It sounds Dutch almost, actually. They like mesh words together. So like instead of, you're not gonna understand this, but like if you were to say ich habe es gesehen, like I saw it, they'd say, it's just crazy the way that they speak. I can't even tell you right now. And it's very shh. There's lots of shh, and there's lots of that's where everyone thinks the harsh German comes from. It's Swiss, fully Swiss. Like I couldn't speak Swiss German because it's an accent. It's when I first arrived in Bern, I thought it sounded Scottish, which is where my dad is from. So I heard my dad and then I heard German because it was just so different. Sometimes it sounds, depending on what part of Switzerland you're in, it sounds a little bit like, kind of like a hillbilly German almost, just depending on where you're at. And like if you go from Bern to Zurich, like you won't understand it. Or if you go to Zurich to Luzern, you won't understand the German at all because they speak a different dialect. And this language actually is not written down. So you can't buy a textbook and learn Swiss German. You just have to learn it by hearing. And it's really neat because when you talk to people, you can tell which regions they're from. And but it comes from Old German. If you read Old German text or have someone read Old German text to you, it sounds a lot like Swiss German. Whereas normal German is pretty much understandable wherever you go, even though it does change a lot in Germany as well, from the north to the south. It's completely different German, and Austria is totally different too. But Swiss, like Germans who have spoken their whole lives will go to Switzerland and have no idea what they're saying at all. Like I said, it's not really a written language, so they just kind of make it up. So like if you're texting in Swiss German, the way that you spell a word will not necessarily be how your friend spells a word, because they just like, they do a lot of double consonants and a lot of double vowels. And so it just kind of depends on how they spell it or how they speak it. Like for example, the word for carrot in German is Karotten, but in Swiss German it's Rüebli. Totally different. Or the word for bike is Fahrrad in German, but in Swiss German it's Velo, which is French. To say like hello in Germany, it's just hallo. But in Switzerland it can be Grüezi, Grüßach, Hallo zusammen, Guten Tag miteinander. Oh no, they don't even say Guten Tag. Guten Tag. They say like Hallo miteinander, or they'll say Ciao. We say Ciao because that's like the Italian coming in, but they don't say Tschüss like they do in Germany. They'll say like Hoi, Hoi zusammen. Like the word for like hospital is Krankenhaus, so sick house in German, but in Switzerland they call it Spital, which is French, I think, as far as I know. Just like simple things like a pill, they just call it different things, and it's so confusing because you don't know these things when you first arrive. You're like, what? What do you mean this isn't a Krankenhaus? I thought I was going to the hospital. A typical Swiss German is going to be rich. They're going to be very proud, and they're going to be very hospitable as long as you can get on their good side. And they also have a hard time trusting you right at first. They're very standoffish a bit at the beginning, but as soon as you get to know them, they can be some of the most friendly people you've ever met. The thing is, you have to remember that these people might look like us, they might have white skin and have normal colored hair like Americans do, but they are different people. Their culture is completely different. So Germans, it's not offensive to call someone fat, whereas in America, that's really offensive. Just because they're just very bold with how they think. Same with the Swiss people. What they might think is 100% okay, we might actually walk away feeling very offended by, but that's not what they mean by it at all. So you really have to get inside their heads, and you have to understand the people and the way that they think. You can't go in thinking you're American, but you really need to try and become as Swiss or German as possible so that you can love these people as much as you possibly can. So definitely hearing the language helps a ton. And if you can hear it and read along with it, or have it in English or in German, that's awesome because you can compare and learn words. But honestly, what I missed so much on my mission was reading children's books, because you learn real German that's not gospel German, but just like German that's helpful. But you learn it in an easy, simplified way. And so I wish that before my mission I had taken more advantage of those things, because you can't read children's books on your mission, sadly. Listen to it just so you have an idea of how it sounds. And then like in the MTC, just don't be afraid to speak it. even when you're in the field and you're surrounded by these people that you have no idea what they're saying, and all you can say is "Ich bin die Sister Gilmore" or "Ich komme aus Amerika" or whatever, as long as there's like a simple phrase, just like show them that you can speak it, because then they'll just ramble off in German, and if you don't understand it, you just say "Noch einmal bitte," like, can you repeat yourself please one more time? They love it when you speak their language, even if it's just something so simple. They love to see that you're trying. So just try. That goes for every mission. I think that any country or every native that sees someone trying to learn their language is really appreciative and sympathetic to that person. And even if they start speaking to you in English, they're just really grateful that you are trying to learn their language. And then if they speak to you in English, just keep going at them in German. Like, just show them that you want to speak the language, you want to learn it. Read your scriptures in German and in English. I started at the beginning of my mission reading the Book of Mormon in German with my English next to mine. If there's words that you don't understand, ask people. Ask people all the time. It's such a good conversation starter when you like see a word like on a advertisement or like something on the train that you don't understand. Just be like, "Excuse me, like, what does that mean?" And then they'll explain it to you. If you want to learn like the accent, I guess, of the natives, ask people to repeat words to you, and then you repeat them back to you, and then they'll tell you how you're saying it wrong, so that you're really learning how to speak the language like a native. And try as often as possible to have normal conversations with people as well, not just gospel, because you come away from your mission realizing that you learned a lot of gospel-related German, but you don't have German that's going to keep you afloat for very long as a normal person. So if you want to use your language, you need to learn how to speak like a normal native. Speak some slang. It's fun. I was working in Zurich. I was in Switzerland by the temple. I was actually a Temple Square sister, and one day we got a referral in the mail from the mission headquarters in Salt Lake that said that there was a woman that just lived right down the street from the temple that she wanted a Book of Mormon in English. And we read the name, and it looked a little bit Spanish, so we thought, oh, maybe she's Spanish. So we decided to go by on this woman, and she wasn't at home, and so we were a little bit discouraged. So the next day we called her, and she answered the phone, and when we introduced ourselves as the missionaries, she was so excited. And she said, you know, my companion was talking to her, and she just was like, so, like, why is it that you want contact with the church? How do you know about us? Do you have any questions that we can answer? Could we actually just come by and meet with you? It's easier to talk. And she told us that, well, not on the phone. She pretty much was just like, I have so many questions, but why don't you come to my house on Saturday? It was a Thursday that when we called, so we had to wait a day. But she's like, why don't you come by on Saturday and we can discuss all these things? And she's like, my companion was like, okay, is there any questions? And she's like, yes, but why don't we wait until Saturday? So we go by on Saturday to this woman, and her name is Sonia. She's Swiss, born and raised in Switzerland. And she shared with us her story about how she met the church. And she had been going through a hard time for the last several years. She just had it so bad. And then on Facebook, over the last couple of months, she had seen this man that she had just like randomly added on Facebook. He had like sent her a friend request, and she had accepted him through mutual friends or something. I don't even remember the details. But he started to post Mormon messages on Facebook, and they started to chat a little bit, and he would send her motivational videos from Mormon.org, and she would watch these things, and she felt something inside, and she's like, oh, there's something about this person. And this man, he lives in Alaska, so he's American, and he actually was excommunicated from the church, but had then been rebaptized just a few months before, a few weeks even, I think. And so he was resharing his testimony of the church and how it helps and how he had gone without it, and he had such a testimony of that it was true and that could help you. And he started sharing this with Sonia, and she had so many questions, and he said, well, why don't you order Book of Mormon online, and the sisters will come by and bring you one? And she's just like, no, like, I don't know. And he just was like, just do it. And she never did it. So he would ask and ask and ask, have you done it yet, Sonia? And she's just like, no. So finally he did it for her. And he said, okay, I put your phone number in, I put your address in, the sisters should come by. And she said, when we came over on Saturday, that she had been waiting for like a week, and she's like, if they don't come by tomorrow, if they don't contact me tomorrow, then they're just not coming. We called on the day that she said, you know, if they don't call on this day, she's just going to give up. We went by, and she had such a spirit about her. My gosh, she is just a crazy, amazing woman. And she sat down and she had questions that she had written down. I think questions that most people have. She asked about women's rights. She asked about our standpoint on gay marriage. She asked about authority and things like that. And what we actually ended up teaching her was the articles of faith, so she could see straight from the beginning what it was that we believed in. We answered her questions about women's rights, about gay marriage and stuff, and she had no problem. She was just like open for everything. Gave her a Book of Mormon, and we said, you read, and she said, okay, I'll read it. We said a beautiful prayer, and she started to cry, and we set up an appointment to come by. Oh, and then we committed her to come to church with us the next day. She comes to church. She's like, I read like, I don't even know how many chapters of the Book of Mormon, and I feel so good. And we were just like, this woman is incredible. We went to our ward meeting that morning, and we said, you all have to go introduce yourselves to her right now, because she is going to be a member of our ward in a month. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, no, go talk to her. She's going to be a member of our ward. And so they took it serious. And from that moment on, she was loved by the ward. I mean, we had so much support from them. It was insane. And just to shorten the story a little bit, because it's just so detail oriented, then multiple times that we went by each week, we could see these little changes that she would make in her life. I remember we walked in and she noticed like within a week that we don't show our shoulders. So she asked us, like, do you guys have like modesty things? And we told her, and she's like, yeah. So we go by the next day, and we look into her room, and she had taken all of her clothes that had no sleeves, and she was getting rid of them. We hadn't told her anything. She just got rid of it. She got on Mormon, on the LDS store online. She bought herself a picture of Christ, of Mary, of the woman at the well. And we walked in, and she had taken down this picture of like mystical fairies or something, and she had put this poster on, and she just like, I heard that, I was reading on the website, and I heard that it was common that many people would have pictures of Christ in their home. We hadn't said anything about that. And it was just beautiful to see these changes that she was making in her life without us. And that was a sign to me that she was so ready for us. The only reason we were there was to teach her the materials. She was truly prepared, and she had so much support and so much love. And I think it was the second time we met with her, we challenged her to be baptized, and she said yes. Without a doubt in her head, she said yes. She said, I know that that's what I need to do. And when the time is right, yes, I'll be baptized. That was actually the first time we said, would you be willing? And she said, yes, like as the time comes, yes, I'll be baptized. Then we set a date with her the second time. Just learning from her and her willingness to do everything that the Lord was going to tell her was incredible. She has so many health problems, and she works like crazy amounts of hours, but she still is at church every week. She's got like 3 callings. We're still in contact. She got to meet my family. She spoke with my parents all the time while I was still on my mission. And when I went back in June with my family, we got to go to the temple with her and do baptisms. I got to be there when she went to do baptisms for the first time. She actually, in 3 days, she got baptized. No, in 3 weeks in a few days. She got the Holy Ghost on my birthday. So this woman is so special to me. She's just incredible. I have so much that I can learn from her still. And she's just one of those golden people that she gets baptized and she's golden, and she stays golden after she's baptized. Just incredible. Just amazing. First of all, you're just about to go on the best and most exciting roller coaster of your entire life, and you're gonna go and you're gonna learn amazing things. You're gonna have hard days, and you're gonna have really good days, and you're gonna have days that just go by too fast, that you wish you could relive and never forget. And you're gonna learn things about yourself that you never even knew. You had in you. You're gonna learn talents, and you're gonna learn so many things that are so good for you. You're gonna go build relationships and have fun with people. You're gonna go learn a language, and it's gonna be fun. I can tell you that missions are fun. You have a lot of laughing time, and you have a lot of smiles and good memories, but it's also going to be the hardest thing you're ever going to do. I'm not going to lie. But to be honest, I think those hard times are the best times, because you build such a strong relationship with your Heavenly Father, and you learn how to become dependent upon Him. You're going to go and you're going to feel a crazy amount of love. I have never felt so much love as I had on my mission. where I would just break down in tears for people that I had known for a week or even a few hours, because I learned how to love them like Christ did. You're going to go wear a name tag that says The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and then it's going to have your name under it. Your name is directly under Christ's. And you're going to go and you're going to be in places that he's been in. You're going to be in the poorest of places. You're going to be in the happiest of places. People are going to be spiritually poor. They're going to be financially poor. You're going to see things that you would never experience being at home. And you're going to be out of your comfort zone. But all of those things are for your good, like it says in the scriptures. You know, it seems like a long time, but you're never going to want to leave it. You're never going to leave that amount of love and spirit that you have with you at all times. So go and use every minute that you have. Love every minute, record it in your journal. Take lots of pictures. Take lots of pictures with members, because you never want to forget them. Write down people's names, write down specifics, write in your planner, write everything down, spill your brains out. And thank Heavenly Father every single day for what you have and what you're given and for the experiences that you have. And pray that you can remember these feelings of love and of the Spirit for the rest of your life, because nothing that you ever do is going to compare to that. It's going to be a crazy ride, but it's going to be the best thing that you could ever do for your life. And I think that if you go about it with the right attitude, it's going to be the best thing in your life for that time period that you've been alive. And it's going to be applicable to everything that you do for the rest of the eternities. There's a reason that we're called on missions, and why elders are kind of expected to go out there, because there's eternal truths and principles that we need to learn, and that's the only place that we're going to learn them. Use it, love it, take it all in, and just smile a lot, because sometimes it's hard. But it's going to be the best thing you'll ever do.
The mission itself was actually a bit of a conglomerate, because there used to be I don't remember the name of it precisely, but there was a Swiss mission that had, that German-speaking part of Switzerland. Might have been the Bern mission, I don't really remember it, to be honest. Then there was the Munich mission, which encompassed like that southern Germany and Austria part, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me. But that all got put together to form the Alpine German-speaking mission, and so that included the German-speaking part of Switzerland on the western border. Then in the center there was most of Baden-Württemberg and Bayern, which is southern Germany. And then on the eastern side there was all of Austria. The entire country of Austria is in the mission. And down south they actually included as well a German-speaking portion of northern Italy. And that was our southern border. And then kind of squeezed into the middle was this tiny little country called Liechtenstein. And so that was 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, those five countries. And they all spoke what each of them would call the perfect language. And I agree with most of them. But so I started in Austria and was in what was called Niederösterreich. And that is lower Austria. It's the section of Austria that includes like Vienna and the surrounding area over there. And I lived in St. Pölten. Went to Vienna for district meetings and stuff. It was really interesting. The history of the church there, or at least like as it is now, like the state of the church, I suppose. It's very I would say concentrated in the big cities, because the stake in Vienna, there's two stakes in Austria. There's the Vienna stake and the Salzburg stake. And Vienna itself has 5 wards, one of them international, so English speaking. And outside of Vienna, then you'll get mostly branches and some wards, So a lot of the member population is actually in the cities themselves. There's a lot of stuff that happened, with World War II, that caused a lot of people to leave the country. And so, regardless of if they were members of the church or not, or any other group that had reason to leave, a lot of people just got up and left, because frankly that was the best thing to do. And it's interesting, though, to look at it because the church has been there for a long time. I don't remember the exact dates, but Europe was one of the earlier missions that apostles and missionaries were sent to in the early days of the church. England is a big famous one. Germany was one of the early places as well to receive the LDS missionaries. Here in Provo, we have BYU, and Carl G. Mazur has got a building named after him. He helped found the school and such. He's German. He was an early German member. He was like an educational reformer, a very important guy. And I think there's even a statue of him up somewhere in Saxony, in Sachsen, as we called it. And that's a big deal because you don't get a lot of the patriotism over there in the sense that we would think of it. Because here in America, life's great and all that, and we wave our flags and we're proud of who we are. And I would say they have those similar feelings of love for land and fellow countrymen. But culturally, you can't express it like that. Just because so many times when they've been united under a single banner, it's been like a time of war. Last one being World War II, which didn't necessarily go very well. And for what they recognize and the world recognizes as good reason, it was a very evil thing that was being done by, it's almost, I feel weird saying it because it's kind of taboo to talk about the Nazis, but it's a good thing they fell, and everyone recognizes that. But that they were very patriotic during that time. They were very into waving their flags and going to rallies, and when that fell, it was just one of those things where they kind of never again, we're not going to be that. We're not going to let ourselves be hoodwinked one more time. And so they have this love of who they are, but they express it very differently. It's, I would say, me and my roommate, we both served in this mission, and so we talk about it sometimes just to, look back on how great it was, right? But also theorize a little bit. And, alcohol is a very big thing over there. We actually served in a city called Ingolstadt, which is in Bayern. In English, we call it Bavaria. And there was a law they passed there centuries and centuries ago called the Reinheitsgebot, which was translated the purity law. And that was like one of their first laws that decided nutritionally what is allowed and not allowed in what you eat or drink. And this one particularly had to do with what is and is not allowed when you're making beer. And it just goes back throughout their entire culture. Beer's always been there. Like, you look at it from this perspective. I was talking with a member once, and he said, let's look at it from the historical perspective of the farmer of the 1400s or 1500s. He said, what did you have to drink? You had water, which was filled with diseases, or you had beer, which was sterile because of the alcohol. And it was already a pretty low alcohol content anyway, so you could put down a few mugs and still go out and farm without a problem. And it was, carbonated, it had a flavor. That was like, heaven's gift to man, He's like, that was a big deal. And there's a lot of pride that goes into their brewing. It's part of their national identity. It's really one of the ways that it's okay for them to show that love of land. And it's something that I think in a lot of American LDS culture, if we can call it that gets very easily misunderstood. I think it was Paul, what he wrote in the Bible, talking about, and I wish I could quote it word for word, but there was a verse, a section of verses where he talked about, to the Jews, I became as a Jew. To those imprisoned, I became as one imprisoned. To those without the law, I came as one without the law, Just talking about how, he was a messenger of Jesus Christ, but he wasn't there to simply tell others your lifestyle's wrong. He was there to show them, you're a great people, and there's a lot of good in what you do. And I think it's really interesting, all these personal cultural quirks that you have, and he accepted and applied to himself everything he encountered and understood it, at least, because, obviously not everything you can do, with the word of wisdom, we're not going to go out and drink so we can understand the people, but you can learn about it and you can appreciate it. And from there, you can get a deeper sense of who the people are and actually connect with them. And that goes for a lot of other things as well, not just alcohol. But that one, I think, was one I ran across that a lot. So if I spent quite a few minutes there talking about it, there's probably a reason for it. There's something called Wiener Schnitzel. In English, we love to call it Wiener Schnitzel. And I don't know how we ended up applying it in the ways we did, because I look at all these hot dogs that we have, and I think to myself, that is not a Vienna Schnitzel. But, so the reason they call it a Wiener Schnitzel is because the German word for Vienna is Wien. And to say Wiener is to say, like, in the style of Vienna. And so it's like a schnitzel after the way that people from Vienna make it. And it's a meat cutlet of sorts or something that you bread and you fry, basically. But there's so much that you can do with it. Different fillings you can put in, different types of meat you can put in there. The really, really famous one that people love to eat over there, it's the cordon bleu. And I remember there was actually a place in Vienna. We called it Herbs because there was apparently a waiter there some time ago. And I talked to an elderly couple once, and they said, yeah, like back in the 70s when we were here, we still called it Herbs back then, so it's been that way for a while. But apparently there was a waiter there who recognized the missionaries and stuff, and his name was Herb or something, Herb, and just started giving missionaries discounts or something like that happened, and so everyone's like, hey, we're going to go over to Herbs. And after district meeting, let's go get something from Herbs. And so every time a Mormon missionary walks in there, with the little name tag, they'll recognize it's the LDS missionaries. They'll say, hey, you guys want the cordon bleu like usual? And they'll just recognize it. That's usually what the missionaries come and get, because that's what we always talk about. You just got to say the chocolate. Oh my gosh, the chocolate is incredible. I remember when I came home, I bought a whole bunch of chocolate before I left and put it in my suitcases and brought it home so my family could have some. And so that just goes without saying. The chocolate is fantastic. But I had to say it. What else? I remember there was one time, the first thing I saw that I wasn't sure what it was something called Mohnnudeln. And to this day, I still don't remember exactly what it was, just because I never really ate it that often. But it wasn't bad. It was just these noodles with mohn, which is some sort of like a seed paste, and it was good. I just remember seeing it, though, and my initial thought was, what is that? Not in like a disrespectful way, but really just that. I've never eaten anything like that before. And I tried it, and it was good, and I ate it, finished my plate, but that was interesting. That was also in St. Pölten, my first area by Vienna. Yeah, they love their potato salads. It's farmers' food. It's hard. It's good stuff. It's, again, going back to the culture and the history, like how beer is a big deal. Their professions throughout the centuries, they've been blacksmiths, farmers, people who woke up early, went to bed late, and worked hard all day, and that was their lifestyle. That was their food. Very good stuff. The infrastructure over there is super impressive. The public transportation being the main point of that. The train system is so capable of getting you where you need to go. Whether or not it's on time depends on where you're at. But I just found it so incredible that while, yeah, a lot of people had cars, you didn't need it. You could take a train from one end of the country to another, hop a bus, and then be exactly where you needed to be. And, that went anywhere. If I was in Vienna, I could get on a train, make my way all the way to Zurich, and then get on a bus to take myself out to a small little village somewhere. And then from there, you know, it's just like you wouldn't really picture that in our American society. You know, you wouldn't think of public transportation as being that effective in being able to exactly place you where you want to be. And yeah, it's got its problems, but it was just so impressive to me that it was as good as it was. And it was incredible. I remember my first area, I was on a bike, and it was really cool to bike around, get to know the area. And even then, there's another level, because you can take your bikes on the buses, of course, and helps you get around even better if you need to get from small village to small village. Living style is there's a lot of apartments. A lot of apartments. I mean, that's all of what I lived in. They were each apartments. And I did know some elders who had arrangements where they had to live with members in their homes. Just that one example, there was like a section of the house that was kind of like the guest area, so to say. They had their own, you know, bathroom on that side of the house, and bedroom and living quarters, you know. And so that was kind of just like sectioned off, and that's where the elders lived. Other than that, it's a very high quality of living. When you talk about things like, you know, the typical things, like, do you have water, do you have heating, whatever else, you know, I mean, you'll live there very comfortably, and you definitely have what you need, a lot of what you want. For people interested in things like, what's the shopping like? I mean, there's definitely plenty of it. It's Europe. I mean, they're gonna make sure that you have the option to go get there much better than the rest of the world stuff, you know. And it definitely was interesting how that kind of stuff grew on me. I remember at one point, actually, I was calling home for Mother's Day, and I told my mom, you know, I'm actually starting to think a little more now about, like, how does this coordinate, or like, how does it look and stuff, thinking about outfits, not just like, hey, I like that shirt, or those are some nice jeans or something, you know, but like actually thinking about what I was wearing. And her first reaction, what she said right away instinctively, was, oh, good. Just like she was relieved. And my sister, who heard it, she was in the background, she starts talking about, oh, we can go shopping when you get home, it's going to be great. But there's definitely a lot of options. When it comes back to some fun cultural things you can get while you're there, you definitely need to look into the Trachten. The Trachten is so cool. It's like the lederhosen and the dirndl, like the traditional leather pant getup that they have, and the dresses for the women and stuff. Very, very, very nice. You got to have the money to get the quality stuff, but if you can go for it, I recommend it. Don't have any myself, but I definitely think if I ever or whenever I go back, you know, whether that be to visit or academic or work or whatever else, I'm definitely going to look into picking some of that up. Definitely just enjoy it. It's a beautiful place. You're right. It's the Alpine German-speaking mission. You're right there in the Alps. That entire mountain range, it's our mission boundaries, you know. It's like we encompass that. And if you don't ever see a mountain, at least while you're, okay, well, rephrase that, you'll never not see a mountain, because even if there's not any in your area, you'll travel to other areas. You'll go to Zone Conference or something, and you'll get to see what the mission has to offer. Going back to the culture, work hard and enjoy your life. You know, delve into the work, love what you're doing there, love the people, and just realize every day how incredible that place is, like the place itself, the earth there. It is a gorgeous place. I cannot recommend that enough, that you need to make sure you do that while you're there. They really love their families and the immediate people around them. As a general rule, it's a type of culture where you trust the people close to you. you don't just go ask a random stranger how you doing when you're walking down the street. One thing that makes Mormon missionaries kind of weird to them, because if you ask them how they're doing, in their culture, that means you're literally willing to sit down and talk with them about the cancer they might have just found out they had. And you have to be ready for that. I mean, they'll either, stick it to you and actually start talking about it like you may or may not have been expecting, or they'll, just think, oh, the nerve of this kid, and wave you off. But the people that, if you can show that you really love them, that you really care about them, without overstepping those boundaries as you progress in the relationship, lifelong friends, like deep, actual relationships. There are people of order. There's a way things are. There's a way we do things, and it works. So let's do it that way. And the more that I was there, the more I just thought, I love this. The more I thought, this is what I've been wanting to have like my entire life back home in America. People who think this way, people who act this way, who understand this. Like it's not as if I'm not the type of guy to just buzz off a stranger or something, but this understanding they had of how important relationships are, how important the people around you are, and work ethic, efficiency, understanding it's good every now and then to sit back and, just have a pint with your friends or something, like that whole mentality. Just hard workers, work hard, play hard, love your families. There's a lot of religious holidays that are intertwined with, socio things like, the government giving days off of work, or reduced hours for whatever else, because of how deeply entwined religion is with the history of Europe. And so you'll definitely find there's a lot of days where you'll be walking down the street, and if you don't have them marked on your calendar, you'll wonder, like, why is no one out? Where is everybody? Because they're all traveling, or they're all at home because it's a holiday. And I remember that happened a few times at first, where I thought to myself, really? Already? Another one? But there's definitely a lot of history to learn from it. A lot of cultural, religious history to learn from how, like, each of these little holidays they have. Learn more, again, about the people. Who are they really? What is their identity as a people? I am a super big fan of German. I love the German language. I took a couple years of it in high school. I remember the young men in my ward who were older than me, they had studied some German. I have a German last name, German family, and so, so I was just like grown up in the idea of German is cool. And then getting there and living in the language, that was an incredible experience. German is, I feel, a very eloquent language in its nature. German, as it is very capable of expressing a lot of things, down to the very subtle aspects of, like, which grammatical form did you use in that sentence, between how you addressed the person, or how did you conjugate the verb. There's just a lot of ways that will determine exactly what are you trying to say right now, and what do you want to convey with that message too. There's a lot of ways to make sure your point is getting across. And for me, that did a lot of helping me realize what is my point. Because I know, you grow up with your native language, and you speak the dialects where you grow up, and a lot of it just kind of gets slurred and blurred together. You don't necessarily think a lot about what you say. Like, yeah, in moments for sure, you definitely do. But it's so ingrained into you that you don't really grasp sometimes. And of course, in each of these situations, the opposite is also true, exceptions everywhere. But there was something about learning German for me that helped me really delve into communication and how, how am I going to help this person? What words can I find to express this, or what words do they need to hear right now? How would they react to what I'm saying? But in such a deep way because of how German is structured. It's very exact. You could have the vocabulary perfect, you could have the accent perfect, and if the form of the sentence isn't exactly right, they'll look at you and think, you're not from here, are you? Or if you have like perfect grammatical form and all that stuff, but your accent's off, they'll be like, are you from Holland? Are you from the Netherlands? And if they ask you that, they don't like your accent. if they say you either have a Dutch accent, from the Netherlands, or an American accent, they don't really like your accent. But within the countries themselves, there are so many different variations on the accent, on the dialects, because, going back again to their history, it's a very long-standing people. You could go back a couple thousand years and find where they actually came from. But if you look back at that, each little tribe, each province, each territory, they were their own kingdoms, and they had their own languages. And if you traveled between them, if you were capable in the art, you could definitely learn to communicate with each other, but they were very different languages. And that still exists today to a point. One of the very many very bad things that happened during World War II with Hitler's regime was the fact that he tried to do away with all these differences in language. And that, in turn, it helps take away the cultural identity, makes them one, makes them conform, under his thumb. And so it's not necessarily as thick as it has been in centuries past, but there's still some gigantic differences in the dialects. And that was something that was honestly so much fun about going between all the different places where you ended up living at. Because my first area was St. Pölten in Austria, and that was kind of a St. Pöltenerisch, Wienerisch sort of a thing. And after that, I got transferred to the complete other side of the mission, to Baden-Württemberg, to a town called Tübingen. And there they spoke Schwäbisch. And it was completely different. And it was kind of funny because I was still pretty early, I was getting a grasp on the language, but, still learning a lot of it. And I remember getting transferred from Austria to Germany and thinking, wow, I can understand the people here. I could understand the Austrians, but it took a lot of work, especially being someone who was fresh into the field. And then getting transferred over to Germany, it seemed so much clearer. And I definitely loved each of the accents, but there are definitely some interesting quirks about them. After that, I went to Bavaria, served in Ingolstadt. Again, totally different accent, totally different dialect. And then after that, I got transferred back to Austria, to Innsbruck. And again, different region, different dialect, different accent. Everyone understands the High German. Very few of them actually speak it, natively. I didn't want to say natively, but they have their cultural identity within their dialect. And they have to learn High German too. A lot of people that I ran into, actually, they view it this way, as the natives themselves. High German is important. You need to learn it so you can communicate with other people. Your dialect is important, your native dialect, because that tells a lot about who you are, where you're from, your family, so on and so forth. Just your personality. A lot of it's embedded within how you speak. And then they also go on to say, but if all you can speak is your dialect, then please just don't talk to me. You have to be able to live in the world as it is. And if you can't speak High German, when you have to, then you're not really thriving in the modern environment. Yeah, again, going back to, there's a way we do things. Efficiency. We're going to make this work. I've heard it said before that the relationship or the difference between Germany and Austria is a lot like the United States and Canada. Sure, I don't know. I mean, I never really thought much different about Canada. I mean, I knew people who told all the jokes and stuff, but whatever. Didn't really ever seem important to me or matter much or seem real. So it was just kind of like, yeah, Canada, it's a place. Cool. And, but the way that they do have their little differences, Germany, like I said, it's efficient, work hard. There's an order to the system, and it's important that we live by it. Austria, yeah, they have that, sure. But at the same time, they are quicker to be a little more intimate, a little less formal. Lots of languages have this. German has a few different ways that you can address somebody. There's the formal way, and there's the informal way. Formal being, like I'm talking to my CEO or a stranger or whatever else. And just going to show that respect. We don't really know each other, but you're important. And the informal way, it's intimate relationships. You're going to talk to your friends, your peers, your family, your wife, your husband, that kind of stuff. They're quicker to, at least in my experience, I saw they were quicker to go to the informal, quicker to go to the intimate relationship talk. And it, of course, depends on the person. But I would say as a general rule, that's what I experienced. I don't want to answer the question of which one did I like more, because I get asked that all the time. But I definitely saw a lot of good in both of them. Austria, though, I did start in. I started my mission there, ended my mission there. There was something about Austria that I connected with, and I would definitely love to make sure they get their time to shine, because I think it's a very special place. The history there, the architecture there, the cultural and religious history, it is so incredible. The land is gorgeous. There's a lot about the people. I would say, aside from that language difference of we're going to be a little friendlier, it in other aspects of life it does show itself. They are a little more laid back, a little more not to say casual, as if they don't care, but they see it, they accept it. Great, I'll live with it. We'll work with it. They don't stress as much over those types of things as maybe a general rule. There was some joke that one of my roommates ran across recently, where there's some meeting of world leaders or something, and someone pipes up and says, "Yeah, the situation in our country is it's serious but not hopeless." And then a guy from Austria stands up and says, "Oh, that's funny, because in our country it's hopeless but not serious." That's kind of maybe a stereotype, but I definitely loved it. It was a good place. The language, it's different. The culture, it's different than Germany. It is its own unique place. It's got its own identity. Don't let any other people tell you otherwise. Can I recommend it anymore? No. I mean, it's just fantastic. In my first area, there was a family. They were the Schildbuck family, and they were definitely the best, most heaven-sent people for me to encounter fresh into the mission field. They were just like they were so loving, so they were so accepting, and also driving, because they were a very, very interesting family in that in the middle of Austria, they loved the New England Patriots. They loved American football. And I remember, I had played a lot of high school football and stuff, got along really well with them. And I just developed a really good relationship with them, and had a lot of good experiences there going with them. They actually had us over for the 4th of July and got fireworks and everything, and they grilled. It was so cool. I remember when I got transferred away, they did something really sweet for me. So there was this local American football team. They actually have American football leagues over there, and the Sankt Pölten Invaders, the two sons in the family actually, Christoph and Patrick, they played on the team, and I had gone by a couple times, and later in my mission, for service opportunities, I actually located an American football team and dropped by randomly and said, "Hey, I played. I want to help out." And it is in the rule book that you can't officially be on rosters and things like that. So I wasn't. We're gonna be clear with that. I just stopped by and occasionally said, we're just looking to help out the community. Can I help you guys during practice? Yeah, and so on the Sunday where I gave my little farewell address before I got transferred, I remember I got back to my seat after church had ended and opened up my bag, and inside there was a little plastic bag, and inside that plastic bag there was Sankt Pölten spirit wear. Like they gave me shorts and a t-shirt, and they even went so far as to buy me shoes. They noticed that the shoes I had been wearing weren't exactly capable of surviving the rest of the way, and they just, after church, I remember Sister Shudbook came up to me and said, "Can we buy you shoes?" And in that very driven Germanic way of knowing what you want, they wouldn't take no for an answer, and wouldn't let me know how much they cost, and gave me shoes. And those shoes were fantastic shoes, and they lasted very well. And that was definitely an enormous blessing to have during my time in my first area, was that family. And you'll definitely have moments on your mission where you'll experience incredibly powerful spiritual impressions, like manifestations of the Spirit working in your life, and signs from the Spirit that the person you're talking to is indeed a beloved child of God who really needs to feel that. And I remember specifically one woman in particular who I knew in my third area while I was in Ingolstadt. Her name was Irmgard Lutz. That accent was awful, by the way, what I just said. But we called her Lutzi because it was a nickname her friends had given her, just because a lot of people have trouble saying her first name. And so they just made her last name Cutesy. And I remember I was there in an appointment, me and my companion were there, and the elderly couple, the senior couple who was serving in Ingolstadt, came with us. And we were talking about, I believe it was the plan of salvation, touching on some of the principles there. It wasn't yet time to delve into, teaching the actual lesson, but we were kind of introducing things. And it happened on this topic twice, actually, when we were talking about the plan of salvation, but she broke down and started crying and talking about how what she wanted more than anything was a family to last through eternities. That she wanted loved ones always there for her. She wanted to be there for loved ones. And she didn't have a husband. She didn't have children. She had gone through quite a few emotionally scarring things that she opened up to us about. And when you're sitting there in that moment, and as it'll change for each situation, but you know, I'll describe here. In this moment, you're sitting in this little room, books everywhere, tiny little counter that leads over to the kitchen. This culture fascinated by the Native Americans. You know, she was. She had like these statues and things on the wall that were all reminiscent of Native American culture, and there was a calendar with the days marked off, and you didn't necessarily have enough room to move around. But you're sitting there in this little apartment surrounded by things, and you just can't deny what you're experiencing there, where you're fulfilling your purpose, or you know that you're helping a woman understand she is loved. That no matter what she's gone through, there are people on earth and in heaven who love her absolutely to death. And after, to play on that phrase a little bit, there's also moments where you're not sure what to do. You're really just not sure. And they can be big things and they can be little things. There was one instance where me and a companion had gotten back from an appointment. You know, the bus system helped us get where we needed to go, super far away, trains and buses. And we got back to the town we lived in, and we didn't know where to go because we had planned out like 2, maybe 3 options of, if we have this much time when we get back, we'll go here. If we have a little less time, we'll go there, you know, that kind of thing. And the timings didn't really work out. Because of like a bus being late or something, we didn't really have any plan that fit perfectly with what we were given. And so we chose a couple of our options, and I said to my companion, just, so where do you think we should go? And he's just kind of like, I don't know, let's go here. You know, just said something off the top of his head. And I got the feeling, listen to him. Go with it. And I thought, all right, yeah, sure. And so we started going that way. And I remember we turned down the road, and there was absolutely nothing there. No sign of life. The shops were closed. There were no people on the sidewalks. No cars even driving on the streets. Bizarre. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, I guess we'll see what we find. And started walking down the street. And about halfway, 2/3-ish of the way down the street, someone cuts around the corner and starts walking towards us. And I was like, Elder, look, there's a guy, you know. And you know, there's different ways you can approach people. At the time, we were just liking to use buzzwords, catchphrases, trying to see what'll stick. And so we approached the guy and said, hey there, excuse us, we'd just like to know what you think happens after this life. And the guy just kind of looks at us. And he says, do you want to know what I think happens, like in general, to humanity after this life, or what's going to actually happen to me? And he said, well, you, what do you think is going to actually happen to you? And immediately he was like, well, I'm going to hell. No doubt about it. If there is a God, there's no way he can get me out of that. And when we talked to him about it, just said, well, why would you think that? And just started talking more about him, what he meant by that. You know, if someone gives you that answer, there's definitely a lot to talk about. And it was one of the most incredible experiences that I had for so many different reasons. So the companion I was serving with he's an amazing guy. He just was having some troubles with the language. You know, it was just one of those things that didn't really click for him. And in this conversation, this is the only moment where I ever heard him speak perfect German. And I mean without any problems. His accent was fine. He spoke with perfect grammar and was responding, understanding what was being said. We traded back and forth. We talked to each other. It was a conversation between all of us, and it was perfect. And I remember we eventually ended up meeting with this guy a few times. And you learn you definitely can't alter the God-given free will that we all have. It just happens sometimes. People just get lost. They'll stop calling you back. They'll move away randomly without telling you. And yeah, but I guess on that note, it is important to realize that the depth of the truth behind the statement that God does have plans. He does have plans set. And that is not to say that there is fate. There is nothing that is written in stone that says, and thus shall it be, you know, like for your life exactly this way forever. You know, it was, there's ways to handle things. If someone chooses to go a certain way, God has a way to bring them back. And sometimes you trust it because you'll go through miraculous experiences like that where all of a sudden, out of nowhere, totally unforeseen, you just don't see him anymore. Then you try. You totally try. And for whatever reason, they're choosing not to go for it. And then you just have to move on, cry as much as you have to, and have faith move forward, because there will always be a way for each of us for things to work out. And when those times come, you just have to do it.
The Alpine German-speaking mission, it covers all of Austria, southern Germany, primarily Bayern, and then to Baden-Württemberg, and then most of Switzerland, so the German-speaking parts of Switzerland. I personally was never able to serve in Switzerland, visa problems, but in Switzerland, well, the mission language is Hochdeutsch, so you'll be trained in the High German, and but you'll learn to understand any of the dialects where you serve. Primarily there's the Austrian dialect, there's Bäuerisch, then Schwäbisch, and then you get into Schweizerdeutsch, which most German speakers count as a different language. It's, from my understanding, I can't really say too much, it's Old German mixed with some other stuff, and I had a companion who had just come out of Switzerland, and he tried to teach me a little bit, and it was just like, what are you trying to say? The hardest thing with the language probably is just learning to adjust your ear to all of the dialects. I mean, the more you learn of High German, the better it will be to switch from dialect to dialect, just because you have a better overview of everything. But, I mean, in my first area in Wien, they speak Wienerisch. There was one time where I heard there's 3 guys, and they started speaking just in pure dialect. And my trainer, who was only a couple transfers away from going home, he's just like, I understood maybe like 10% of what they just said. And it was, so, and there's a different dialect for every area you serve in, but in school they teach High German, so everyone will be able to speak and understand High German. So it's not too big of a deal. It's just, there are some areas that are a little bit more so in the boonies in the countryside where a lot of the older generation will only speak dialect just because that's what they're comfortable with. Each of your areas will cover a ward. The church is reasonably small, like it's pretty good. You'll switch between wards and branches. The wards usually run at about 150. It's probably about average active attendance. Please don't quote me on these numbers. I'm not the best at numbers, but I mean, they're going to be a lot smaller than pretty much anything you're going to see here. Well, yeah, a lot of the active wards will be about the size of your average student ward. With Austria, It's a little bit slower than Germany, I think. I mean, I haven't served everywhere in Austria, but from my experience, I served in Vienna, one of the really big cities, the biggest city in Austria. And then I served in Hagen-Halsbach, which is the least populated of our areas. That was a small branch. That was a cool area to serve in because that's where the church started in Austria. That's where they had their first baptism, so it was just kind of cool to see that church history there. A lot of older families had been in the church for quite a while. They're really cool. The growth is slower, like it is in most of Europe, but I'd honestly think that is going to change within the next couple of years significantly. While I was on my mission, I got to see an interesting change from, I guess what you call kind of the traditional way of doing missionary work to more of this, I don't know, the newer ideas that have been coming up. Switching and focusing, instead of having the missionaries be pretty much purely responsible for going out and finding people to teach, to working primarily with the members, to spending the time that we're not teaching with members, working to reactivate members and working with the active members to help them invite their friends to come into the church. Germans are very private people. It's not, I wouldn't say it's not socially acceptable, but it's very strange to just talk to a stranger on the street and just to start talking about personal subjects, especially religion, because that's considered one of the more private topics. And so for a strange American to just kind of stop you on the street and say, hey, what do you think about God? A little weird. Most of the time you get the response of, oh, I don't have time, I'm busy, not really interested, don't want to talk about it. Because it's just not really comfortable for most Germans. Whereas when they're talking to someone that's their friend that they know is a Mormon, they've kind of seen them interact, they have a greater opportunity to begin really talking about the gospel. And it opens doors. Of the people I taught, the greatest experience, or I should say the most effective experience in teaching, was one where the investigator was introduced to the church by a member. And those are generally the teaching records you find that lead to baptism, that lead to activity, which is probably one of the hardest things out there, is just keeping someone active. Because you're living in a world that, well, it ain't Utah. Religion's not a huge thing out there. I mean, most people in my mission are Catholic. It's kind of the Catholic central of the German-speaking world. They're born Catholic, they're raised Catholic. Most of them will, as they say, they'll die Catholic. But it's more of a tradition than anything else for a lot of the people out there. There's a lot of good people, and I led a lot of very, very faithful Catholics who are an example to me. But in general, I think it's kind of more of a feeling throughout Europe, is just kind of a turn away from active religion. And I'm pretty sure it just comes from the history of what the continent of Europe has been through the last couple 100 years. When you work with the members, you find those people who are interested but wouldn't respond, so to say, to just someone stopping them on the street. And I really think that's going to change how things work in my mission especially, and hopefully throughout all of Europe. I wouldn't say there's any huge differences in the Austrian and the German food. It's all pretty similar. Potatoes are kind of a big ingredient with a lot of the stuff. The potato starch they make noodles with, and one of my favorite foods is kanoodle. It's a dumpling. In Austria, they'll do them primarily with potato starch, and they usually will fill them with like sausage or something like that. There's also dessert kanoodle, which they fill with fruit and you eat with sugar. And then in Bayern and Baden-Württemberg, they're primarily made of bread. It's called Semmelknödel. Love it. It is so good. This is probably one of the biggest parts of my mission that not related to being a missionary, that I miss the most, is just the food there, because everything is so good. I quite honestly can say I don't remember eating anything that I didn't really like. The strangest thing I ate was, we had an investigator who had us over, and he gave us it was pork nose. But it was actually really good because it was just like a really salty, fatty meat. And it was just cut really thin. And it was really good. Their bacon, I guess you can find the American bacon. You always find, what's one of the funniest things in Germany is, in all the stores you'll find the American section. And they have all these foods that they claim to be American foods that are just, they're not American. But they resemble American foods. They're always really crappy. But you can find like the American style bacon, which is what we have. But they have their Schinken. It's usually smoked meat that's cut really thin. And that is fantastic. I love that. Main dishes, you'll eat a lot of Spätzle. It's a noodle. It is so good. One of the more popular dishes is Käsespätzle, which is just this noodle baked with a lot of cheese, and usually they'll do caramelized onions on top of it, and oh, it's so good. Then typically they'll serve it as also like a side, and you have gravy to put over it. The sausages. One thing I miss the most is just being able to walk into the supermarket and just have an entire section just dedicated to sausages. Everything is wonderful. In Bayern, one of the more popular ones is the Weisswurst, so the white sausage. That is fantastic. You eat it with sweet mustard, and you'll have pretzel, so soft pretzel, which is also really popular in Bayern. Some of my favorites was Rotkraut. It's a red sauerkraut. It's a little bit milder, a little bit sweeter. They usually have apples in with it, and it's really good. It's one of the other things I personally bought a lot of. I really liked it. Schupfnudeln, I really like. It's a potato noodle. They're kind of long. The traditional way of serving them is with sauerkraut, and they're like real bacon bits. They're just chunks of bacon that they throw in there. It's just really good. I learned to eat like a German about halfway through my mission from my last German companion. He would just cook the noodles up in a little oil and pour some applesauce on top of them and eat it like that. That's really good. One thing that's really popular in Austria in the fall especially is pumpkin soup. I love pumpkin soup. It is so good. Those are kind of the main things that are different that you'll experience. They eat a lot of Italian food there as well, being pretty close there to Italy. And goulash is really good. They pull it from Hungary, and it's kind of a stew. Usually made with beef. That's really good. Cheese. The dairy products out there are fantastic. I miss having the variety of cheese that you're able to get out there. You get some of the stronger cheeses, which I know not everyone likes, but you can adjust to them. If you end up in Switzerland, you will eat a lot of cheese. I had a companion, he was also out of Switzerland, or had just come from Switzerland when he got into the area. He was so sick of cheese, like, after a week of having been in Switzerland, because the members were just so excited, like, oh, the missionaries, we gotta feed them the traditional Swiss dishes, which are fondue and raclette. Raclette is really good. I had that a couple times on my mission. They have a special kind of stove for it. They have a grill on top where you can grill, like, mini sausages, peppers, and just whatever else you have. And then each person gets this kind of like little shovel that you put potatoes or whatever you want on it, and then you cover it in cheese. And there's a space between the grill and like the bottom of the burner that you stick that in there, and the cheese just melts over everything and kind of grills your vegetables, whatever you put on it. Well, that's pretty good. Looking at more like the differences you experience from going from either Germany to Austria, Austria to Germany. The best explanation that I received was actually from a member in Austria. He talked about the Germans. They're kind of very order-oriented, like, what's the rule, how are we going to follow it, who's responsible for this, and this, and kind of very methodical in what they do. And then he talked about kind of the Italians and more the Spanish people and how they're pretty relaxed. They're kind of like, well, why should we do this? I mean, like, we can just relax. And then he talked about Austria was kind of a mix between the two. And I noticed that a lot, especially having first served in Austria and then going into Germany. The Austrians were a little bit more laid back than the Germans in their opinions. They still shared a lot of the traits with the Germans, and like being pretty efficient in what they did. There was usually a pretty good order to how things went, but they were usually a little bit more laid back. I came to love both of them, of course. I mean, I can't. I love Germans, I love Austrians. Like, coming back to America after serving my mission is just like, Americans are so weird. I've grown very used to just how the Germans did things. Like I said earlier, they're pretty private people, especially the Germans. It's in a work environment, it's kind of taboo to talk about personal subjects. There's definitely a difference between the older generation and the younger generation. The younger generation, they're a little bit more involved in kind of the world culture that has been developing over the last couple centuries, and not centuries, decades. There's kind of a specific order that things go in with Germans. They're not, you need to get to know them before they'll really open up to you. And it's just like getting to know anyone else. When you get to know a German, start at the surface level, just kind of, hello, how are you? Kind of develop a relationship and things will open up. One thing that's very important to Germans is, your use of time. You should be on time. You should do what you say you're going to do. Be reliable. And just make sure that you're honest. They will really admire that. They appreciate that honesty very much. And if you say you're going to do something, do it. If you say you're going to be somewhere, be there at that time. Preferably early, but be there. With the language, to Americans, Germans typically sound pretty hard just because of their intonational patterns. We like to kind of raise and do all sorts of stuff with our intonation, whereas Germans is very flat. They seem to be void of emotion. That's a cultural thing. It's not true. Germans are awesome. With the language, they make up for expressing what we express through our tone of voice, through adding words and stuff like that. And so initially it may sound really harsh, but as you get to know the Germans, they're really a kind and a loving people who care for people. They're private, and so it doesn't really appear that they care for people, but if you're their friend, you're their friend for life. And they're going to do whatever they can for you. Their loyalty to their friends is something that I really admired when I was out there. Christmas is awesome. I love Christmas in Germany. One of the big traditions that they have is the Christmas markets, the Weihnachtsmarkt. Every city will have one. My personal favorite was, I was in my third area, so Esslingen am Neckar, which is pretty close to Stuttgart, more on the west side of the mission, for Christmas. And they have one of the more famous Christmas markets. Esslingen is a very old city. It was founded by Romans, and it was considered a emperor's city, and so it was very well protected throughout the years. And so they still have a lot of the old architecture that they've had, and they've restored it. And it has a very pretty old city in its center. And they do a medieval Christmas market. And so half of the Christmas market is just decked out like a medieval market. And as they have performers, they had fire dancers and a whole bunch of other performers from throughout Germany and wherever they could pull them from. That would just perform medieval music or medieval kind of themed things. It was just really cool to see, just kind of get that cultural aspect of the Middle Ages coming in. In Germany, they have 3 Christmas days. They have Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and then the second Christmas holiday, so to say. And during those 3 days, you don't go knocking doors. That's just like, you will usually be told by your mission president, do not knock doors any of those days. Go spend time with members, do something else, but just people do not want to be disturbed on these days. It's pretty much like that for any holiday in Germany. It's just, holidays are the Germans' personal time. You don't interrupt them on their holidays. There's a lot of Catholic holidays that are also observed throughout our mission, and they have about the same thing that happens is, you know, this is their personal time, please don't interrupt them. But kind of like I explained, the Germans being personal people, dooring is, I'm just going to throw that out, not the most effective way you can go in Germany. It works when you're doing everything else, but it was always just our last option was dooring. So my second area was where I started to really feel comfortable speaking German, and we were in church. I was understanding about, you know, the normal amount of stuff I understand and getting what was going on, and then we had a member who was getting married to a sister who was out of North Germany, out of an area where they spoke Hochdeutsch. It was like kind of their dialect, so to say, where it was more common. And my second area, I should clarify, was in Upper Austria. Most people spoke pretty much only dialect. And so this lady from North Germany gets up and she starts bearing her testimony, just kind of introducing herself to the ward. And I understood everything and was just like, what happened? And that is when I first began to realize that there was a major difference between Hochdeutsch, what I had been studying and learning, and the different dialects, which I found out the only way I could differentiate, tell the difference between for that first little while was how much I actually was able to understand the person. It was a little bit more fun when I got into my last couple of areas, into Bayern and into Baden-Württemberg, because my German got to a point where it was good enough that I started to be able to hear and understand the differences between the different dialects. The two I had the most experience with was Bäuerisch and Schwäbisch. My personal favorite is Schwäbisch. It just kind of has this, it's a little bit, the intonation is a little bit more similar to Schweizerdeutsch, just because they're sitting a little bit closer to the Swiss border. They just kind of have this rise and fall, the Äffli and die Fehle, that just kind of runs throughout their dialect. You'll run into different words that are used by the different dialects, like in Schwäbisch, like to talk, to have a conversation with someone, mit jemand zu sprechen. They'd say mit jemand zu schwätzen, ein bisschen schwätzen, switching over to Bayerisch. My impression of Bayerisch was they seemed to speak a little bit deeper in the throat. I don't know, it's difficult for me to explain the differences in the dialect just because I never really tried to speak the dialect all the time because I was supposed to speak Hochdeutsch and my German was bad enough that I didn't need to try to go into the different dialects. But Juroi Bäuerisch was kind of like a typical phrase. I speak Bayerisch. Juroi Bäuerisch. They, I don't know, they seem to cut off a lot of the, they shorten words, they conjugate their verbs a little bit less. And your R's, in German there's like 3 different R's you can use. There's, you roll the R in the front of your mouth, you roll the R in the back of your mouth, and then there's like this really deep just R that you use. In Bayern, they use only they roll all of their R's in the front. So ich rede Bayerisch. And that's kind of, it's fun, but like I said, I don't know why, I just really like Schwäbisch, it just kind of had this fun sound to it. So, Schwäbisch is primarily spoken in Baden-Württemberg, in Schwabenland, as it's called. I think I'm mixing those two up. My geography is not the best, I'll admit that. But when you get closer to the west end of the mission, you'll hear more Schwäbisch. Bayern is spoken, or Bayerisch is spoken throughout Bayern, so a little bit more the central part of Germany. or not central part of Germany, but central part of our mission, my mission. Yeah. Of my mission. So Munich, and then a little bit heading west, and then more into south, and then into Austria. It's hard to say exactly where the dialects kind of pick up and end, and then switch to the next dialect, because in certain areas, each city can have its own dialect. It was a lot like that in my second area, in Hague. We were much more in the rural areas of Upper Austria. There was a different dialect for every single city. And then all of the large cities tend to have kind of their own variation of the dialect, like I was saying. Vienna had Wienerisch, Salzburg, you have Salzburgerisch, and then Munich you have Bayerisch, and then you go in more west, Stuttgart, into that area is where you hear more of the Slavish, or the Slavish and English and Swedish. Yeah. And then in Switzerland is where you get the Swiss German, the Schweizerdeutsch, which, like I said earlier, is considered by most German-speaking people a completely different language.
Vienna's a really old city. It's been around for forever. I believe the Romans founded it, honestly. It's been around for thousands of years. It used to be the capital of a great empire. It's still the capital of an empire. The thing about Vienna is it's very cultured, very classy. When people think of Vienna, they usually confuse it. I think that's pretty funny. They either think of Venice or they think of Australia because it sounds like Austria, but it's neither of those things. Vienna is kind of like your average city in Europe. I like it because it's kind of, I like to call it the eastern capital of the West. It's got a lot of mixture from a lot of the Eastern European countries. There are Hungarians, lots of Serbians, Croatians, Turks, Bosnians, Russians, you name it. You can find them in the city. It's very multicultural. When I was in Vienna, we lived on the 4th floor of a building, just very high up, and it was within the inner city, and so it was in this old architectural style building, and you would look out the window and you saw down a canal and where the U-Bahn, the subway, was going, and you could just look down and there was just other buildings like that all the way down with the street, and it set off a really good mood for just the cultural art of Vienna itself. I was there in the winter. It was really cold. Really cold. It's humid there, and so the winter just really seeps into your bones. But overall, it's a pretty nice experience in there. There are a lot of palaces. I would go with my trainer, and we would take the U-Bahn early in the mornings, a couple of stops to a really famous palace called Schönbrunn, and we would go running on the grounds for our early morning exercise. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was really beautiful, and we would go to the top of the hill at the other side of the palace and watch the sunrise if we were lucky. If the timing was right before we'd run back down and head back home. Yeah, it's typically very. It can be foggy. It can be very foggy. It can be very cold. At least when I was there, it can also be very humid. So it really all depends on the preference of the city, whatever it wants to do. There's a lot to say about the city. It's been around, like I said, for forever. One of the things I really like about Vienna is that there were so many wards in one city. For me, that was big, because most of the cities, even some of the bigger ones, only had a few wards. Like Stuttgart. Stuttgart's a pretty big city. It's well over 500,000, 600,000 people, but there's only 2 wards, one in German and one in English. But Vienna has 5 for its size, which was really cool, because that meant there was a huge influence of missionaries and a huge influence of members in that city, and they were all working together. I mean, the steak was there. Stake Center was there, and people recognized that Mormons were kind of a thing. They didn't just kind of mistake us or dismiss us. A lot of them would recognize more of this, more than the average person would on my mission, I suppose. Just for fun, I'm going to try and do this in a Viennese accent to see if I can do this right. So let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. The thing about Germany, and German in particular, is because it's so old and it was created before word could spread around very quickly, they have a lot of dialects. And dialects are more than an accent. You might think of an accent like a Southern accent or a Californian accent, but really to compare different accents is like comparing American English with maybe British English, or American English with thick Scottish. It can be a pretty stark contrast in terms of words or how things are pronounced, and Bayern, Bavaria is no exception to that. It's not too difficult, honestly, to interpret from German, but they definitely have their preferences. One of the big things is the international football team, the soccer team in Munich. It's called FC Bayern, and their logo is Mia za Mia, and that makes no sense in German, but in Bayerisch it means Wir sind wir, or we are we, or we are us, and that's just a Bavarian phrase, a Bayerisch phrase that they use for their logo, and it's just completely different. There's the famous line by Caesar, I came, I saw, I conquered. In Bayerisch, the way you say that is Ich komme, komme, komm. And that makes no sense, because what it should be in German would be Ich kam, ich sah, ich eroberte. But that's how you say it in Bayerisch, is Ich komme, komme, komm. And so it's very different in several aspects. It's a thick accent. Some of the people will speak High German, as it's called, just very standard German, and some people, especially the older people, you'll greet them on the streets and they will speak with this slur of phrases and words that you just do not recognize. Actually, kind of another thing, a typical greeting in southern Germany, specifically in Bayern or in Austria, it's a word called Servus. You can't find it in northern Germany at all. Servus, it's just like saying salutations, I guess, or greetings. I think it comes from Latin for some reason. I don't know why, because I don't think it means anything. But it's basically how you just say hi, and you say it to anyone, especially in Austria. You can just say it to anyone on the streets, just, hey, servus, instead of saying hallo or guten Tag. You say that, and people will respond right back, and it's warm, it's friendly, it's pretty open, and the Bayerisch really love it, to hear that phrase. They really like to know that someone knows their dialect a little bit more than your average person would. Vienna's German, if you added a little bit of French. That's kind of how I put it. They take a couple of phrases from French instead of from the German. For example, the word for a roll in German is Brötchen, but the Viennese will call them baguettes. It's stuff like that. It's definitely a different dialect, and there are several dialects within Austria. Vienna is by far the best known because it's the biggest city. The other reason I say it's like French is probably because they speak a little bit more nasally through their nose, so it kind of comes out a little. Yeah. What's an example? So with High German, I mean, if you just wanted to say Hi how are you? It's good to meet you. You say, wie geht es dir? Hallo, wie geht es dir? Es freut mich, Sie kennenzulernen. In Austrian, it'd be only slightly, Austrian German would only be slightly different, but the accent sounds very different. So you say, Servus, wie geht's dir? Es freut mich, Sie kennenzulernen. Just kind of much higher pitch, kind of faster, more engaged. Yeah, just it comes through the nose more. I don't know how to explain that. Well, the word for Vienna in German is Wien. Wien is how you pronounce it, and in English it weirds you out because you're thinking it says Wien because it's a W at the front, but you pronounce it Wien, of course. And the way that the Viennese will say it, just it trails like Wien, Wien, just holding it through their nose as long as possible. Yeah, and that's actually where you get some of the words that you might recognize in English, like a wiener. That's actually the word how you say that's how you say Viennese. It is Vienna, and it's also what Germans will call a hot dog, or the equivalent is a Wiener, yeah, Wienerwurst. So a Viennese sausage, I guess. I was teaching an investigator in Vienna, and she had been an investigator for a good amount of time. She had a baptismal date, but it broke off for reasons, for complications, and she just seemed unsure. And we went through an interview, and it was kind of hard to speak to her. She spoke Spanish. We didn't. She spoke limited German. We often would have an interpreter from the ward help us out. But we found out that she came to church every week, and we knew she prayed. But she wasn't so confident, so we tried to figure out what it was, and we fasted about it, and we decided that she wasn't reading the Book of Mormon, or wasn't reading it like she should. And so we told her that she needed to do that. She needed to make that a priority to read a chapter every day. And she promised she would do that, and she kept her promise. And I remember this so much because 2 weeks after we gave her that, she called us and said, we have to meet right now. And we didn't have a joint teacher or anything, and so we had to meet in the library. Just in the middle of the kids section, so her son could just play around. And she told us, we all sat down, and she told us right there that she wanted to get baptized. That she read the Book of Mormon, and as she read it, she had a dream that told her that it was true, and she knew it was true. And it was so powerful. I remember that because I knew that the Book of Mormon, that the power that it can give the people who actually try, who sincerely try, can receive an answer, that they can really get it. And she was baptized 3 weeks later. It was really cool. One of the big surprises I had on my mission was the power of inspiration. Because you don't fully understand what inspiration from the Holy Ghost is. At times, sometimes you do have a moment, but there was nothing quite like the missionary field, like the mission itself, where I got more experience than anywhere else, than anything that I've ever had in my life, or possibly ever will. One of the big things I really remember is a member in Munich when I was in the international ward there, and he was less active. He hadn't had any contact for months, easily, maybe even years, because we were opening up the area for a new pair of missionaries, and I just had the inspiration to contact this guy. We didn't know anything about him. The members couldn't really tell us much. The bishop knew, but he was pretty much the only person who could help us. And there wasn't really much reason to try and go by on him. Most people didn't even think he lived there anymore, but I decided that, well, what it was is I just had this feeling. I felt like I was supposed to do it. So I went by, a couple of times with my companion, and nothing happened. We knocked the door. His name was on the box. There was no response though, and so we kind of assumed the worst, that maybe we just didn't want to be contacted or answered. So I just felt like we should write a note saying, hey, we came by, wanted to say hi, hope you get back to us, and left. And a few weeks later, without realizing it, a month later actually, he contacted us. He asked if we could come by. We said yes. He said, "Oh, that's great. I've been out of town. I was in the United States for a while, but if you want, we can come and I can come and we can talk together." And so we did, and he kind of expressed his insecurities about the church and about his experience and everything. And it didn't seem quite like he was ready to come, but he was genuinely happy that we had contacted him and shown that we cared for him. That was really big to me. But it didn't stop there. I was transferred to a new area a few months, less than a month later, and so I didn't hear from him. And then I saw him again about a year later, actually. And he was at the train station where all the missionaries were going between transfers. And I saw him, and I was so surprised to see him. And I asked him what he was doing there, and he said, "Well, I'm waiting for one of the missionaries to say goodbye before he goes home." And he explained to me that he was active again, that he was in the ward, that he had a calling. I was amazed. I was so happy, and he felt so indebted to me because I was the one who contacted him, and I didn't feel like I had done anything. I just felt like I was just following the Spirit. And it turned out to just succeed, I suppose, and do so much that I couldn't forget it. And I've since kept in contact with him. We're really good friends now, actually. He even took me out to dinner when I went to visit a few months ago. And I can't forget how much the Spirit inspired, because it was so simple, but it was so needed for him, and it brought about such a change that I will never forget that experience. I would say that whoever got a call to the Alpine German-speaking mission, better known as the Alpine mission, to actually try to prepare before they go, because if you just kind of skip it off and say, "I'll learn everything in the MTC," you'll learn a lot, but you won't learn like you will if you've prepared. It's like studying for a test. If you've studied the material in advance, then you know what's going to be on the test, and you don't have to fret about it as much or be as lost or confused. I would definitely say as soon as you get the call, regardless of whatever mission, to start reading your scriptures and start making it a focus in your life. To kind of start cutting down instead of indulging on things of the world like movies or games or whatnot. I would also say that you have a lot to look forward to. The mission, it's as cliche as it is, it changes your life. It will inspire you to be a better person, to want to help, to want to lead, to grow, and to bring the gospel to everyone long after your mission is over. So if you take those steps now to prepare for 2 years of your life, then you won't waste a single day, and you won't regret it a day of your life.